Hi, thanks so much for joining us with APC Chats, where we basically work to spotlight people, voices, and opinions that deserve a platform and may not often get it. That said, feel free to join us in the conversation, following us at APC Collective on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So we're joined today by the talented team of Voto Latino. We have Mario, Steve, and Jessica, who are our longtime friends, believers in a mission that is beyond themselves and working to engage more communities in the voting process. Specifically right now for Voto Latino, you guys do much more work than that. So I wanted to kind of get your stories and kind of talk about the work that you do and how it's evolved and where you see it going.
Sure. So I can kick off. My background is actually, as Audrey knows, in marketing and advertising. So I started out at agencies in New York, later in Texas and Austin, starting to focus in on what my passion was, talking to the Latino community. But after a little while, I found that I really, really wanted to focus on social good work. So somehow I got incredibly lucky, and a friend introduced me to the amazing team at Voto Latino. And it was a perfect fit. It really, really allowed me to use a lot of the skills that I had developed in marketing and advertising, talking about concepts and really communicating with the community in a way that was meaningful and authentic and helped change hearts and minds. But I felt like I was doing selling social good instead of selling products. And I think there's a lot of synergies and overlap in the work I used to do and the work I do now, which is fun. It's really, really identifying how you can connect with folks through digital, through different mediums, and have conversations. And for me, it's really about that.
What about you, Steve?
Can I add something to her story? When she said that she got introduced to the team at Voto Latino, there was only 2 people in the entry.
Yeah.
Hey, that's the whole team.
team.
No, because everybody must be thinking it's like 10 people, but no.
It was just a powerful few.
Yeah. And Steve was the I think first half of that story. I'll let him tell his story, but it's been an incredible journey to get to know the organization, which, like Steve was saying, was 3 people. But it really is a community too. It's all the people that kind of come along with the group, including Audrey, who has been a longtime friend and supporter.
Well, talk to us about the mighty beginnings and where you're going next, Steve.
The beginnings. So when I first, when Maria Teresa offered me the job, I moved to DC, and her plans unfortunately didn't work out, and we didn't have an office, so we worked out of Starbucks.
There were no pods back then.
Oh,
right?
There were no pods.
So we just worked out of Starbucks and her apartment for a couple of months till we finally found an office space, and then we started building the team. And when I say office space, I mean 4 cubicles.
Yeah, I
So
get it.
So
everything's
it's really a
always-
labor of
Oh,
love.
wait, Maria
Yeah.
Teresa had a
Too.
cubicle?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
She was next to me.
Humble
They
beginnings.
shared a
I love
cubicle.
it. Wow, I
Went
didn't know
from
that.
the kitchen counter with Raj making coffee
Nice.
to 4 cubes.
I love that.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm one of the newcomers to Voto Latino. I began about a year and a half ago almost. I began in December of 2015, and before that I was doing communications work for an immigration nonprofit out of DC as well called United We Dream. And for me, my trajectory was a little bit different. I guess for me, I started off doing communications work because I believe in the power of stories, and I believe in everyone has their own story to share, and that stems from my own experiences as well. Before joining United We Dream, I did the Peace Corps, and I worked out of Costa Rica.
Wow.
Yeah, that was really amazing.
I couldn't get through that application.
No?
I had the ambition and the
Yeah.
idea to do it, but I'm like, this is complicated.
It was intense. It was
2 year
intense.
commitment also sounds
Yeah,
like a
it
lot.
was 27
I was fine with
months.
that. It was just the long application.
It was a very long application. It took about almost a year before I finished the application until the time I got accepted, until I actually left to Costa Rica. But I went there and I lived in a predominantly Nicaraguan immigrant community, and I got to see a lot of struggle, and I saw abject poverty like I'd never seen before. And I noticed there that a lot of the immigrants from Nicaragua were treated not that differently from immigrants here in the United States, right? So they were blamed for a lot of the social problems. They were blamed for the lack of opportunities. They were blamed for the crime. Yeah. So then I kind of reflected on my own experiences living in the United States. Obviously, growing up in El Paso, it's very different because you grew up with 80% raza, right? Everyone's Latino.
I didn't know I was different until I got to UT.
Exactly. So by the time I got to Austin for graduate school, I realized, oh my God, there are not that many Latinos out there in the world. When you grow up in El Paso, as both you and Jess know, it's just the white people are the minorities there. It's really interesting.
I think there's a lot of synergies there with a lot of border communities.
Yeah. I think so as well.
And I think they're really, really good examples, and we can learn a lot from places like El Paso, LA, to folks that are embracing diversity and embracing this community to help build up.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like growing up in El Paso, sorry, Steve, you're outnumbered. Where'd you grow up?
Los Angeles.
All right. Big, beautiful city. Which you have that on us. But I think El Paso is amazing and beautiful.
I love El Paso.
But growing up in El Paso, you didn't know that people couldn't be doctors or lawyers or business owners. Like, that was just what you did. And coming here and walking on campus, I was getting like Muslim Student Association invites, American Indian Student Association invites. And I'm like, why doesn't Tridel offer me a flyer? Like, what is that about? And not that I thought any which way about it. It's like the first time I looked at my skin as something different. And it made me reflect and kind of own a narrative that I hadn't been forced to own before. Because people were doing it for me.
I think that's the first time I realized that I'm a Latino and I should embrace that part of myself. Because in El Paso, you don't stand out, obviously. Everyone looks like you, and everyone, for the most part, speaks Spanish as well. So it's, I wouldn't say a rude awakening, but it's certainly an awakening when you leave.
I think it was a really, really great experience. I had kind of a different experience growing up because my dad's family is from New York. My mom's family is all from Mexico. So I grew up spending all my summers in Chihuahua, in Mexico, and occasionally going on holiday to the East Coast. So when I was with family in Mexico, I was Mexican. I was like 100%, that. I speak perfect Spanish as my first language. And I didn't feel any different. And when I went to my dad's family, didn't feel any different. I was welcomed with open arms. And it was the kind of shocking thing to me when I got to school, when I went away to school in the East Coast, was that people didn't welcome differences with open arms or didn't welcome others. So I feel like that's a really big driving force in my work is trying to make other people understand that these are the beautiful things to be celebrated. Because for me, it was always a fun thing to speak Spanish in front of my English-speaking cousins and have them not understand.
Like,
and then on the other side,
what did you call me?
On the other side of of my mom's family, being able to be different, it's a special thing.
Yeah, and Jess also is from Chihuahua, so we have that in common too, because I was born in Chihuahua as well, so our roots go back pretty far. Yeah.
Well, my great grandmother's from Villamala, which is not Chihuahua. It's like the stopover.
It's the stop. Can we talk about the Villamala burritos, please? I haven't been to Chihuahua since I was I think 13 years old, and I went with just my sister and I. She's 10 years older than I am, but we stopped for some burritos for sure.
And I didn't know the connection when I would go, because I would go with a friend's family. I'm much more acculturated in the sense that my grandparents were born in like Crystal City and Fabens, I believe. So it was like, it wasn't a traditional experience in that way of being a Latino. It was just, my family was my family. We loved what we loved in terms of food. We spoke, Spanish with my grandmother. My parents would speak Spanish so that we didn't understand. And I'm the one who pursued. I'm like, wait a minute, people are going to think of us as different. And I see my grandmother's skin, and she would wear copper and turquoise and silver. And initially I hated it until I looked at her. And I wanted to know more and more and more to honor her. So I feel like I've embraced culture, not because it was something that I thought needed to be embraced. It was just kind of owning it in a different way. And then having corporate America be like, hey, you young girl that dressed a lot better than I do now, why don't you be on the diversity team for SBC or for Dell? And I'm like, wait a minute, why don't I get to play with those guys? Why do I have to do this? And then when I started doing it, I fell in love. And that's been my
well, and I think it's something that is so relevant now. It's in a lot of the work that we do, is bringing in those kind of new trends and different opinions and different styles and different taste. It really makes all of us kind of as part of the Latino community tastemakers and folks with a different perspective, which in some cases is valued, which I appreciate, but in some cases we need to force people to see the value of it.
Right.
Speaking of that, and you guys naturally, I mean, you're working for a mission that is inclusion, really, into the process, into the thinking, into the engagement, and developing the next country and what it looks like politically and leadership-wise. How is being where you're from, whether it's identity, ethnicity, family, journey, how has that shaped your role and your work today?
Who wants to take that?
Steve.
Unpack it, Steve.
Unpack that. Steve. Fearless leader.
OG.
I think that just like understanding like our parents' experience and understanding the position that we are in, at least being in DC, like we talk among all my friends that we're sort of like the 1% in that space of the Latinos that have made it, and to understand the position of influence that we are in, but also remembering where we come from, remembering our parents' sacrifice and what they've gone through and their story, and then where we are at and how much further we could go, or it's fine if you want to stay like in certain spaces of like there's some people that like I truly believe people could go as far as they want in life, but it's up to where you want to go, right? And I think, at least for me, understanding my parents' story, and because I have a lot of family members that are comfortable with, in the sense of like, well, we had an LPR campaign, that's a legal permanent residence, trying to tell them that they should become U.S. citizens, and it's hard. A lot of people don't want to do it. It's not. It's expensive, and they don't want to take the test. And at least in my family story, they're happy with they're happy with the legal permanent residency. They don't feel that they have to be.
They don't see the benefit
of becoming a U.S. citizen. And when we did the kind of comparison of side by side, the only thing that changes is that you have the right to vote, and they don't see value in that. But to connect the whole story is like, I feel that sometimes it's okay if they've made it that far, because where they come from, they didn't have anything.
Yeah.
And they also oftentimes come from countries in which they really do have oppression, and they don't have a history of civic engagement. So I think, going back to your question about what drives the work that I do, I think back to when I was in high school in El Paso, and no one ever asked me to register to vote. No one really cared about my political opinion, right? So I think when I think about it that way, and I think about 18-year-olds growing up in El Paso now, and I'm wondering, are people actually reaching out to them now? I'm pretty far removed from high school at this point, and I don't know if it's changed. I don't know if we've done enough to really engage those folks who haven't been engaged for long periods of time, whose parents might not be citizens, so they've never voted. They don't pass down that heritage, that tradition of civic engagement to their children. So I think that's also a challenge when you're trying to engage the folks that we do.
And that's definitely part of our mission. I think that's why we do the work that we do, is because nobody is talking to these folks. Nobody talked to any of us, I think, around the table about voter registration or getting involved, and actually even understanding that it doesn't start and end with registering. It's about holding your elected officials accountable. It's about going to town halls. It's about just calling or knowing who your representative is, so that when there is a pothole in your street, you know who to call. That's why people, my husband and I have this conversation a lot, but you can tell neighborhoods where folks are affluent and engaged because they have their, streets kept up. They have lighting. They have all these resources that come from the government that we really, put in power, and we are responsible for keeping accountable. And it's folks that, like Steve was saying, that maybe, are satisfied and have come from much worse situations, that don't know what else is out there and what else they can have and what else they can do. Yeah. And it's really, really up to us at Voto Latino, at all the, corporate social responsibility kind of programs, all of these folks, especially at a time now when there's so much distrust in our government. It's up to nonprofits, leaders, brands, all of these folks to connect the dots for our community and keep our electeds accountable.
You talk about being from different countries where people naturally don't distrust institutions because of political oppression, because of fraud, because of corruption and crazy amounts. But even in East Austin, right? Austin is our adopted city. My parents moved here after my brother and I were in school, and then my sister moved back. To talk about a Latino family when you're dancing at Miguel's and you see your dad also dancing at Miguel's. It's kind of a chaperone, but not really. Did you go to UT?
No.
Okay, well, that's an experience. That's a UT experience when back in the day.
Oh, okay.
But I'm picturing you running into your dad at
All my
bar,
friends
so
had
that's
crushes
fun.
on him.
That's fun.
It was awesome. But even in East Austin, where I live, and I was talking to my friend Lonnie Limon, who you know, and he was saying, we have to call the city to go and mow the side streets and the mediums because people just don't complain here and they don't know who to call. So it's not necessarily just people of foreign descent who have come to the United States who don't trust government or who think they've made it so much that they don't care about getting involved. It's even local citizens who have constantly been marginalized and disenfranchised and maybe underengaged civically that don't have the basics of who to call. And I was thinking when you're talking about conversations, it's like we probably need to reframe the 5 key conversations you need to have with kids. From be nice to trust yourself to no bullying to the birds and the bees to getting involved to finding a job. Like I feel like we need to reframe the context of being human and making civic engagement and responsibility part of that, because I don't know that is a lesson you learn from your parents these days.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, I was just going to say I think there's a lot of organizations now, more so than when I was growing up, that do see it as a responsibility. It's their corporate responsibility to reach out to communities. You see so many campaigns now when you're watching award shows or when you're watching things that involve celebrities, obviously, that reach to younger audiences, that they feel like they know what's going to hit with them, what's going to really be effective. So you'll see commercials like Coca-Cola do very diverse commercials, or you'll see commercials like which one was the one from the Academy Awards that was also really good? But anyway, you see a lot of these organizations, but what I worry about, or what I think about when I watch it, is that do they really care, or do they understand, or is it just for the bottom line? But
it's both.
It is both.
Working with corporate America, it is both. I feel like it's people in positions of influence who can tell a story that they really believe in, that they know is going to resonate with their core values as well as with their consumers. And if you look at the trajectory of philanthropy, it started with family foundations, like very wealthy families like the Rockefellers and the Fords that knew they needed to do more to engage for a lot of different reasons, but it started there. And then with corporations being more mindful because their consumers care, because they're getting called out. And I feel like back in 2000, the news media, just like the 24-hour news cycle, it made companies a lot more accountable, because all of a sudden, in my mind, the truth wants to be known. And now with the news,
even in today's age,
absolutely, and with social media, we're holding people accountable. And I feel like that's where you get the Starbucks of the world thinking like we could do it a different way.
Sure. And
the Coca-Cola is being like, Coca-Cola is an international brand. It's maybe a U.S. company, but it's an international brand. So they're standing up for their beliefs. So I'm a champion of corporate. I actually wanted to work in politics, but I figured that you can move money and intention so much faster working in the private sector. So that's what I'm.
You probably could, yeah.
Well, and nowadays, when so many folks care about where their products come from and care about supply chains and environmental footprint and all of these things, I think it's similar to the way that we keep our electeds and our government accountable. We keep our brands and our corporate America accountable through the power of our dollar and where people invest.
More and more.
And I think that it is to everybody's benefit to really make sure that they're listening to the community. For us, it's really to uplift those voices, because some folks don't understand the power that they have. With the Latino community, it's $3 trillion of buying power, and only growing. In the last couple of years, we have an attack on immigration right now, and it's become an ugly and dirty word. But the reality is that the growth of the Latino community is coming from
second, third generation.
From births. It's not. Immigration has been net zero for the last couple of years. So we really have to kind of reframe these conversations and make sure that everybody's included in the conversation and we're not marginalizing these very powerful groups.
So when you talk about reframing the conversation and kind of shedding light on the facts, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of headlines, but we still have
not
to dig.
The alternative facts.
No. I wanted a fact factory, like factory.
Oh, I love it.
You heard it here first. I was just like, why aren't we creating memes faster? Why aren't we trying to disseminate statistics faster? Like, who's doing that? Like, why aren't we doing more of that? Anyway, we'll talk about what's next.
You got cooking. Steve's our creative.
I know. Like, I'm looking at him. We have more work to do. But when you talk about shedding light and engaging and empowering, like, you've done so much work, and from Maria Teresa, you guys, the originals, and the people who've come before even us, like, there's been so much work that's been done, but we're nowhere near finished. And I feel like this last cycle highlighted the fact that there's some real disconnects between different points of view. How do we get to the next level, and what is next for you guys and the work that you do?
You know, something that actually Maria Teresa says a lot around uniting people is, I think that there's a lot of folks trying to divide people across racial lines. But when you really look at the demographics and you look at the growth and you look at voting patterns, I'm sure this applies to buying patterns. I haven't looked into that. The way that we should be having and framing these conversations is around generational lines. So right now, millennials are bigger than baby boomers and Gen X and any generation that came before them. Gen Z, the next generation, that is digital native, the most diverse in our country's history, is the largest generation we've ever seen. So to get folks born after the 2000s, to get them engaged and to make sure that they're educated and brought into the conversation, I think is kind of our next challenge and our next, project. Yeah, responsibility.
So we're going to have to do gaming insertions?
Yes.
Well, just to add to that, at least what I'm excited about is that, like, this, millennials are having babies already, and we've been talking to millennials for many years, whether they participated or not. They've been fully aware of the messaging, and when their kids grow up, they're going to pass that information down.
Yeah.
So it's not like they don't know about it. So we are going to have we're going to have a new generation of kids that are part of the digital space, where their parents are probably going to start voting, because you do reach a certain like a lot of my friends. I've been working at Voto Latino for a long time.
How long, Steve?
Well, like 8 years. And my friends are just starting to pay attention because of the last election. And how long did it take them to become politically active? But now they're having families. They have kids, and they're thinking about, how are they going to raise them? So, and the other cool thing too is that they kind of been through the system, so they know how everything works. So their kids are going to be guided by their parents, versus like someone like me, that I was being guided by my parents that grew up in a different country and had a completely different experience than the one I had. And so we're going to have a new engaged generation. I think by nature they're going to be engaged. We're just going to have to figure out different ways to connect and talk to them. But they're going to be fully aware.
It's going to be fun, though. And you're absolutely right, though, because I have friends from high school who grew up in El Paso who are Latino but U.S. citizens, and they weren't that interested into politics. But now a couple of them have kids, and they're worrying about their schools, and they're worrying about how their tax dollars are spent. And now maybe it was also just the election cycle and the nature of it. They were paying a lot closer attention, and maybe a little bit of prodding from me, too, to get them to actually vote. But, I mean, they're starting to care, and I'm hoping that now that they're having kids, and as we start having kids, and they'll be more politically active as well. And it's just going to be how we reach them, right? Because I think one of the things that I see among young people is that there's a lot of distrust among political parties, right? So then we have to
media, institutions, you name it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of distrust, and how we fill that void as to being a trusted source and continue being a trusted source is going to be huge on how we reach these folks.
Yeah, and one of the things that was, I think, really exciting is we don't talk about the success that the Latino community had last year. I think when you look at the numbers, it was the only electorate in the country that grew. So every other demographic, African Americans, whites, you break it down however you want, Latinos are the only ones that grew in terms of new folks in the system and turnout. We don't have all turnout numbers yet, but we've also been really heartened because it was our biggest year ever. We registered close to 200,000, over 177,000 folks, and contacted 1.5 million directly by providing information, and really on top of that had the most engaged volunteer base, had the most engaged supporter network that we've ever had. And it goes to both to what Steve and Mario were saying, which is exciting, is that we have I think laid a great groundwork for this next stage.
2018.
Yeah, 27. There's elections in 2017 too. Yeah, but
there are
every year.
Yeah.
I also think that what I'm hoping is happening is like a slingshot, where it seems like we're going backwards in some ways of division or rhetoric or just the divide. It seems like we're going backwards, but I'm hoping that what this does is it kind of pushes us or propels us forward. in a very fast and intentional way, because I feel like that's happening. I mean, I'm awake to more conversations now than I've ever been, and having, you guys, and I give total credit to Voto Latino and Maria Teresa and Jessica and Steve and Eddie and everybody who's ever talked to me about the importance of participation, because I feel like the work that you guys do is at the very core. It is the grassroots movement. It is empowerment. It is building the conversations for the next generation and the next generation, because not having a seat at the table changes the outcomes of those rooms. And so you guys have opened my eyes to the importance of staying awake.
Right, and having a seat at the table is
Staying
actually
woke.
staying.
I know, I wanted to say it, but I was trying to correct my English. I'm like,
We got to stay
Maybe
hip. I'm barely a millennial, but still stay woke. No, but you're right, though. Having a seat at the table is huge. And that's why, I encourage folks to start thinking about making their own runs for city council, for school boards, for
Local level.
Local level is going to be huge. And I think that once we really allow folks to see the difference that they can make locally, it'll just hopefully trickle down to wanting to really get involved nationally as well, right? So
Yeah.
starts
And if
local.
you can't run for office, come to some of our events here in Austin. We're doing on Thursday, we're part of the big Auditorium Shore showcase. Our good friend at South by helped us hook up with this amazing concert with Oso Motley, Panteon Rococo, and Residente. It's a Yes, from Calle 13. It's a show open to the public, but you can come learn about the work that we do, get yourself registered if you're not registered, and engage in some really fun content that we're planning.
And speaking of that, not to end there, because I do want to talk about the fact that we don't have the leaders that we had in the civil rights era, and so everyone, and I think we were talking about this way back when in DC in a circular table at some hotel, about who are the people that we're supposed to look up to now. And do we have the mentors, or do we have the guides or the leaders? And I think I said, wait a minute, I have mine. They're my grandmother and my dad and my mom, and the people who worked hard to make sure that I have everything that I need. But do we need the leadership like we needed it today? And is that something that we're thinking about in terms of programming against or lifting up the next?
I think that it feels that way because of history. History has shown that there's a movement and there's a leader. And so we're seeing a movement that's being developed. So it feels like, because it's sometimes feels like history is repeating itself, and we're like, where's our leader now? But I think times are changing, and there could be leaders everywhere. You could be a leader in your own community and stand up, right?
Right. I also think movements are being a lot more intentional about not having one person be a leader. I think of the Black Lives Matter movement, where they haven't really tried to uplift one person as the leader of that movement. And from that, you kind of see the movement as the leader of itself, right? But so in that sense, I don't know if we have within us the next MLK or the next Cesar Chavez, but what we really hope that people feel is that they can be that person for themselves and for their communities and for their families. So it's within all of us, I think.
And that's the beauty of social media and all things online engagement and digital strategies to make sure that people are empowered. I get the daily action texts, so I feel like I can contribute. Thanks, Scott. But for you guys and what's next in your journey at Voto Latino and beyond, what is it that you hope to see for yourselves? What do you want to do? What kind of impact do you want to have?
Sure. So I'll start. I think for us, it's really about engaging this next generation, right? So Voto Latino was founded on the idea that, 10, 12 years ago, young Latinos could be reached through English language content, through digital and social. Back then it was MySpace and and text on not smartphones, but people told our president and founders that wasn't the way to talk to Latinos, that they weren't online, that they weren't going to be engaged that way. And I think Voto Latino has made a habit of being on the cutting edge and setting trends and proving the critics wrong. So I think I'm excited to continue bending the rules and engaging folks and doing things differently. So that's what's exciting for me.
Maria Teresa said something last year that really connected with me, and she was like, we've sort of been training for this moment.
Yeah, you have.
And so at least for me, I've been doing this for 8 years. So moving forward, how can I take all this knowledge and really put it to good use? There's a lot of people in different industries that are moving up in positions of leadership where they're calling us now.
Yeah.
We don't even have to pick up the phone and be like, hey, want to partner with us? They're calling us. It's how do we maximize this to the much larger levels? And for goals, I think I told Jess that the other day. I think Voto Latino is going to turn 15 soon.
Oh my goodness, your quince. What are we going to do for
Quinceañera.
the quince?
Exactly.
Is it going to be a quinceañera, really?
I'd like to have
has
like
to be. We're Latinas.
1 million voters by then.
How about 15 million?
Or 15
All
million.
right, let's do it.
Let's get more.
And then
More
we
and
can
more.
get that sponsored.
Yep.
Well, they've already touched upon the Voto Latino goals, and they're lofty, but certainly achievable. But I mean, I think for me personally, I think back to last year, and it was really tough. It was really tough. I think back to November 8th and whatever your political leanings might be. For us, it was a really harrowing day, and we were kind of in shock. And November 9th, there were tears shed, and we were all trying to figure out what was next, right? And even for me, I was like, holy crap, what happens now? What's January 20th going to be like? But I think from then we've all, in our own ways, become remotivated to the movement, whether it's been through speaking to someone and hearing their story, or even your own personal experiences. So I've gone from everything to run for office to join a campaign, maybe in the future for like when looking out for 2020, who's going to be running and how can I support that candidate, and making sure that the Latino community remains engaged. So that's what I'm looking at personally. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I feel like it's open-ended, and I feel that after the last year that we've had, we all had so much fun, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what's next with us.
One of the things, though, that we were talking about in my family of like, because we had voters on different sides, and depending on comfort level, depending on exposure, access, or connection to culture, people voted or they didn't vote, and they voted in ways that I was completely surprised. Mm-hmm. And you know, I'll completely admit to trolling my uncle's page. He's an uncle by marriage, and I'm like, actually, here's a link. Actually, and my sister's like, you do that when you get mad. And I'm like, well, I do that because I feel like there's such a disconnect, even with my immediate circle, and not so immediate circle. It's not my immediate family. It's my wider family that is married in different ways, different cultures, and different experiences in cities. And so I'm like, I feel like we probably should have had conversations about issues as a family. And we probably should encourage that. My mom is very much like, there's no yelling in our house. There's no politics in our house. There's nothing that could boil blood in a conversation at dinner. I'm like, but shouldn't we be talking about the issues in a way that isn't polarizing? And shouldn't we learn to help kind of shed light on issues? And I feel like if we do that in our family, in our circle, then I would have hosted. I would have hosted like, hey, we're going to talk about these 5 things. If you have facts or articles, bring them. I want to know.
You're so right.
And like even just something like that could start
that
process.
Kind of it makes me think of when we started talking about last year and kind of our goals. And one thing that I think still holds true, and people talk about, what can I do? How can I engage? How can I exactly what you're saying? Like, how can I just go within my own sphere of influence? There's around 27 million Latinos that are eligible to vote. Half of them are registered. If every single Latino finds one other Latino in their circle that is not
the Primo Project.
That's
it's
it.
not
Sorry, I'm going to stop
registered,
naming things for you guys. You're going to put me on retainer. But it is the Primo Project.
It is.
It's like, and all of your cousins, because I have 26 first cousins and so many more that are second and third. Like, just get someone
we all have somebody
engaged
in our circle.
You're so right, though, about just the having lack of conversations. There were friends of mine on Facebook who I just purposely blocked because I didn't want to hear what they were saying at that point. So instead of me as an individual outwardly wanting to know more about why they think the way that they do, we shut down, we shut off, and we say, no, you're wrong, I'm right, and they think the same thing about me. So
and then nothing progresses because it's self and other.
Exactly.
It's important to have the conversation with the other side, because you will never realize how much in common do you have, and sometimes there are misunderstandings. Jess, you should tell your story about the guy you talked on the airplane. No, you tell it.
It's your story.
It's my story.
No, you do it. You hang up.
It's a great conversation, and it's an example of what happens when you have conversations with someone. Maybe you don't agree on the same page, but it's powerful, because that person, next time he goes to to go vote, he will think about this stuff.
So my good friend that I actually owe a text to, I haven't texted him back in a day, so he was worried. I fly back and forth to DC a lot. I was on a plane ride from DC to Austin and sat next to an older gentleman. I never talk to people on planes. It's kind of my quiet time, work, or catch up on sleep. But I just kind of connected with this guy and gave him some suggestions on what to do in Austin. He was coming in to visit his new grandson. And we just really connected. And he told me about his story. I was telling him about my story. And, you know, two drinks in to the flight, we
Like
shared
when I
some
was
cocktails. Shared some cocktails. Into the flight, it kind of surfaced that, you know, I was a progressive and he was very conservative. And he kind of brought up some stuff about the election and how he felt about it and some of the things that made him vote for Trump. He was a 2-time Obama voter, and because of, you know, for different reasons, this year really felt like he had to vote for Trump. We were getting into a conversation totally civil and just really around facts and around listening to each other. I shared some of the reasons that I don't, you know, support him and some of the things that I felt were wrong. You know, you talk about security and emails. Trump and his cabinet are doing that. They're all on unsecure servers right now. And why isn't that not an issue? Let alone that having the nuclear football put all over social media. So sharing some of these things, he was really shocked and hadn't heard about them because I think he doesn't actively seek out this information, just like I don't actively seek out the reasons that a 2-time Obama voter might have turned for Trump. And it was a really enlightening conversation. I really appreciate it. And like I said, we're text friends now and kind of stay in touch and keep talking because I think we really all need to listen a little bit more and find, just like Steve was saying, those commonalities, because at the end of the day, we all want the same things. We all want good jobs. We all want good education. We all want opportunities for our families, for our loved ones. And we can all do that if we work together instead of working against each other.
Instead of blocking your Facebook friends? Wait, is he in Austin now?
No, he's
I was going to say we should invite
DC
him.
based.
That would have been amazing.
I think what happens is that we don't have these conversations until we're really upset. Like you were sharing earlier, you would go into your family members when you were upset. And
but I do it in a way, like a friend of mine texted me from Australia. She's like, I don't know who that person is, but kudos because you're being really gracious and you're not beating them down with, it's just respectfully, here's another alternative view or whatever. So
no, that's good.
You don't have to be mean. Don't be mean anymore. No more trolling. There's way too much trolling.
No, but the point is we need to have more conversations just in general. And like, I think that's how we move forward together. Yeah. We all want the same things.
We do. We just sometimes block out other perspectives because we're so entrenched in self and other. And there's evolutionary reasons of why that happens for, you know, tribalism and why people want to protect.
You got to be part of a group.
It's survival. It's survival. But I feel like I think they did some research recently of just like cooperation. It's like survival or competition or cooperation. And the more people cooperate, like actually that ensures better survival than competition. And there's enough for everybody if we only knew that.
I think it'll get better generationally. Yeah. I think you're seeing so many kids go to school with kids that look different from them, that worship differently from them. So I'm hoping the younger generation is the one that really understands this and really is the one that leads us forward. They have to.
I have no doubt. And I feel like to that end, and I want to wrap this up because I know you guys have lots to do before your event, an event series that's happening here. But you spoke of the younger generation kind of being more open and more mindful of difference and not in a way that is exclusive, but just like, yeah, it is what it is.
They grew up with it, yeah.
They're growing up with it. And they're better, I think, at difference because they don't have the perceived barriers. And I don't know if time teaches them that or they're just learning not to see it at all. What do you think is gonna, like, what is Voto Latino gonna look like in 10 years or the next 15 years? If you've done your job, because I always think we should be doing our jobs to get to better problems. So what would the better problem look like? Yeah.
We won't need to do voter registration anymore. We could focus on other stuff. People are just gonna do it on their own.
Yeah. No more voter registration, automatic or simpler systems.
Yeah.
Simpler systems. Okay.
Yeah, I think simpler systems for participation in general. I think that's what we need, is to have two-way conversations with our government and with our electeds. Any other closing thoughts?
Just get involved.
Get involved. And how can people get involved with Voto Latino?
Go to votolatino.org, sign up to our email list. We'll send you stuff, but also just like we have Google now. Just could type anything and everything pops up. I mean, obviously go to votolatino.org first, but everything's there.
Yeah.
That's what's easy about it now.
Just Google it.
Yeah.
Follow us on all the social media channels. You know how to find us. It's fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. I really believe in the work. Thank you for the inspiration that you've given me and my team and anyone I've ever been connected with. I always talk about the work that you guys do. I try and find funding.
Thank
I feel
you.
like sometimes it's a little more difficult than I would like. But getting people involved and engaged and empowered is the most important work of our time, and you guys are doing that daily. So thank you for your service, because you are serving the country.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Audrey.
Thank you.
All you're doing.
It's very touching.
It's a team effort, so
Yes.
thank you too.
Hi, thanks so much for listening to us at APC Chats. Hopefully you walk away with some additional perspective or insight that you didn't have before. That said, if you want to continue the conversation, please do so following us at APC Collective on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.